Moving on from the Charlie arc, next in the 8th Doctor run of plays is the Divergent Arc. Coming out in late 2003 and over the year of 2004, this was among the last gasps of the Wilderness years, before the premiere of New Who in the following year. Another was Stream of the Shelker, a webcast starring Richard E. Grant as the official 9th Doctor, and Derek Jacobi as the Master. Only one of them would reprise their role. Before New Who, Big Finish was the closest to a continuation of the classic show as you could get. For the first time in over a decade, new stories were being made with the current Doctor and using the original actor. It was only audio, but it was a real continuation from the TV movie, and I feel like they don't get nearly enough credit for that. Big Finish was making New Who before there was a New Who, and New Who has been cribbing off their ideas for years. With 2 8th Doctor series and Zagreus under their belt, it seemed they had the future of Doctor Who in their hands. They could do whatever they want with it, and they wanted to do some really weird stuff. Things that would only really appeal to the most established fanboys and girls, but only those of a very particular constitution. The Divergent Arc was their chance to go full Alice in Wonderland, full experimental, full weirdness, taking the Doctor and Charlie to a whole new universe of possibilities. I'm not the biggest fan of the Divergent Arc, if I'm telling the truth. It has the bare bones of something that could have been really great, but it just seems so underdeveloped. It was originally meant to be 6 or 8 series or something, but then they learned that New Who was in production, so they shortened it to 2, because they probably realized that they might need to start making more normal stories with the 8th Doctor that less established fans would actually be interested in. It's set in a universe that is devoid of time, whatever that means. In our universe, time and space are intrinsically linked. A sufficient mass can warp it like your dad on a trampoline, pulling everything towards him. We call this gravity. And time is warped as well. GPS satellites have to account for it because time runs slower the closer you are to your dad. Now, I may be overthinking it a bit, but time is a concept as much as it is a basic, fundamental part of the universe. All the people in Divergent Universe, including the Doctor and Charlie, experience time the same way they would in the main universe. Yet the people of that universe have no concept of time, nor do they have an alternative concept that basically boils down to the same thing. They still order their days, they keep to schedules, they have yesterday, today, tomorrow, they talk about the past and they speculate on the future. So the Divergent Universe experiences time exactly the same way we do, it's just that nobody thought to invent a way of counting it, which is among the first things that a society does before they do a civilization and start suing each other. The only real difference between the Divergent Universe and the Prime Universe is the Doctor can't travel through time. So nobody would have invented the concept of time because nobody invented a way to travel through time, because I guess you have to invent time travel before you can build a clock. The whole universe without time thing doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't really add anything to the story, except giving the Doctor an excuse to be moody and limit him to one time period, which is just a waste. Playing with concepts like time and our perception of it has a lot of story potential if you have a little bit of imagination. To see what I'm getting at, see Dr. Manhattan in The Watchmen and watch the movie Arrival. They're both very good examples. One has hexapod alien things, the other one has a big naked blue guy. Pick your poison. So, the first story is called Scherzo. It's written by Robert Sherman, the guy who wrote Dalek in the main show, which he adapted from a Big Finish play called Jubilee, which he also wrote. You've heard me geek out about this guy before. He's brilliant, and Scherzo is no exception. I've now said that name both ways people pronounce it, so now everyone can be mad at me. He took the pitch of the Divergent Arc and gave us something experimental, otherworldly, and downright fascinating. The TARDIS has entered the Divergent Universe, and everything inside the TARDIS is being eaten away by this inky blackness that seems to be erasing everything it touches. They escape out the doors and the TARDIS disappears, and the Doctor and Charlie find themselves in a white abyss. The TARDIS is gone, and they are stranded in a place that seems too alien for the senses to comprehend, blinded by the light as they try to hold on to themselves in a universe that doesn't make any sense. And there's some sort of a malevolent presence stalking them in the blight. This is a story that could have only ever been done in audio. If they were to animate it, it'd just be whiteness. That's it. One of Sherman's main strengths in storytelling is bleak introspection, and here he uses that to examine what it really means to be a companion of the Doctor. Why does the Doctor travel with humans in the first place? What is the relationship dynamic? Could it ever possibly be an equal relationship with such a power imbalance? Are the companions pets to him? Is it symbiotic? Or is something much more sinister going on? It's the kind of story that can bring you to tears.
I came here to be with you.
You silly little girl. Do you think I want you here? I killed myself for you so you could live, and yet here you are. You betrayed me. You betrayed all that I gave up for you.
Alright, this may be an unpopular opinion, but the Doctor is being an absolute bastard. Yes, the Doctor gave up everything to keep Charlie safe, and yes, that's very, very noble and everything. And yes, if the Doctor had never met her, then none of this would be happening to him right now, but none of this is Charlie's fault. He didn't have to save her from the airship R101, but he did, cracking the web of time, nearly destroying the universe in the process. When Charlie realised this was the case, she begged him to put her back, but he didn't. He ignored her wishes, setting off a series of events and decisions that ended with him infecting himself to the point where he had to exile himself from the universe. None of which is her fault, and none of which would have happened if he had just put her back on the bloody blimp. Sneaking aboard the TARDIS was the only agency she had for 2 stories. And after all of that, not only is she kind enough to forgive the Doctor for smacking her in the face and using the same damn excuse every bastard does when they hit a woman, she's decided to join the Doctor in his exile after he ruined his life by an overly elaborate martyr complex. Get a dog up here, self-absorbed twat. Aside from that, this story is overall really good. I consider it a classic. Just be aware that the Doctor is really cruel to Charlie in this one. There's some tough conversations, things get very toxic, and I wouldn't blame you if you skipped it, but it is a Rob Shearman work. Next up is Creed of the Kromon. This one is a little controversial, almost universally despised, but let's be honest, that's only because it follows Scherzo. And I happen to know this for a fact, I listened to all these out of order. Scherzo was the last one out of the Divergent Arc that I actually listened to because people said it was so good. And this one really isn't that bad. It's written by Philip Martin, the guy who wrote Vengeance on Varos and Mind Warp, and if you liked those ones, you'll probably like this one. He lifts a lot of his ideas and a lot of his concepts and a lot of his plot elements from it. What with the naked and subtle as a brick critique of capitalist corporatism draining a planet of its resources and enslaving a workforce who are too brainwashed to realize how messed up their situation is, and one of the companions gets forcibly mutated into something. Somebody has a fetish. In the start of this one, we get some idea of the layout of the world that they find themselves in. The planet is divided into several zones, all linked together by interdimensional portals, guarded by this incorporeal shape-shifting bastard called the Croaker. He's sort of like customs at an airport, only he seems to be experimenting on them, and he's rooting through their deepest, darkest thoughts, with no consideration for their privacy, so yeah, basically like customs at an airport. It seems that the Divergent are using this planet and its separate zones to do, like, experiments on evolution, but with only a very basic understanding of what evolution is, equal to your average creationist. After some mild mind rape, the Doctor and Charlie find themselves in a desert biome. It's here that they meet a new companion for the arc, Kariz. He's among the companions who are officially canonized in Night of the Doctor. He's a chameleon man, and royalty among his people. He changes colour to suit his environment, and he's not all that he seems. He sort of reminds me of Turlo from the 5th Doctor run. An unreliable companion with a dark past, not joyfully along for the ride, he's just sort of there because can't think of anywhere else he should be. He's dismissive, surly, prone to the odd violent outburst, but that's largely due to him being traumatized by the events of this story, which I will not spoil. They are quickly captured by the Kromon. They work for a corporation, and they are subjugating Kariz's people and draining his world of resources and enslaving everyone and something capitalism bad. But they are also giant termite accountants who offer the Doctor a desk job, and they recruit Charlie to mutate her into one of their queens, so they could force her to reproduce, birthing the next generation of Kromon. It's like The Handmaid's Tale reimagined by H.R. Geiger. When you're writing one part of a larger story, you're usually given a list of requirements for the story. I am bloody certain that right at the top of the list, written in blood, they had Charlie must suffer, in all caps. And here she suffers in a way that must hit pretty close to home if you happen to be worried about your reproductive rights being stripped away. Aside from that, Creed of Kromon is fairly decent. But after following a masterpiece like Scherzo, being only decent is probably the greatest crime it could have committed. The Natural History of Fear is next. You may have heard of Dr. Light stories, new Who episodes that focus on secondary characters where the Doctor has a limited presence. Blink, Love and Monsters, etc, etc. Natural History of Fear is more a Dr. Less story, where the Doctor doesn't actually show up, aside from in state-run propaganda, but to confuse things further, the voice actors are still there, they're just playing different roles. The Natural History of Fear is largely a meta-piece that examines how the Doctor coming in and saving the day could affect a society in the long term. The story takes a lot of influence from 1984, a bleak, hopeless situation where nobody is free, not even within your own mind. Thought crimes carry a heavy penalty. Questions are forbidden because questions lead to answers. Answers lead to knowledge. Knowledge leads to freedom. Freedom leads to dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction leads to unhappiness. And you don't want to be unhappy, do you? The state loves you. The state wants you to be happy. Happiness through acceptance. Productivity through happiness. And if you step out of line, don't you worry. Your closest loved ones won't even think twice about reporting you for the common good. It's also a commentary on copyright law, taken to its logical extremes. This is all they have as the synopsis on the Big Finish website for this story, and I am bloody certain that this is written on the walls of the BBC. Next is the Twilight Kingdom. It's a base under siege. And it's such a basic, normal Doctor Who plot that would fit so well in the Prime universe that it doesn't make any sense in this arc, where the mission statement boils down to let's do some weird stuff. A bunch of terrorists are hanging out in a cave, and people keep being absorbed into the walls. It's like they're being digested or something, and the twist is so obvious that they put it on the bloody cover. Next. From the mundane to the farcical, we have the Faith Stealers, and I say farcical in a positive way. The next zone that they visit is home to the Multihaven, a city built upon peaceful coexistence of different religious groups. It's broadly a comedy with some serious elements. It's very much in the same vein as Douglas Adams or maybe Neil Gaiman. The Multihaven is home to many religions. Some of them are fairly normal, like what you would usually expect a religion to be, but then there's also people who worship fabric and spoons, and my favourite, the Church of Serendipity, who believe all accidents are happy accidents and worship Whoops, the god of tripping over stuff, whose adherents all jump for joy every time someone makes a mistake. But among these happy religions all coexisting together, there's one religion that wants to take all that coexistence rubbish and throw it out the window, and just goes around converting everyone until the Multihaven is just a monohaven. In order to enter this place, the Doctor, Charlie and Careers must be adherents of some religion, so the Doctor is forced to invent one on the spot. Calling themselves tourists, they say that they start their day with a ritualistic cup of tea, and they worship carers. All hail carers. Along with the comedic elements, there's also an undertone of the importance of mental health when recovering from PTSD, and moving on with your life after a traumatic experience. They're not exactly subtle with this part. The Faith Stealers is overall really good, and I highly recommend it. It pokes fun a bit at some of the absurdities of religion, so if you're particularly devout, you probably might find this offensive. I'm not particularly religious myself, but if there is a god, I like to think that he, she, they have a sense of humour. After the Douglas Adams-esque romp that was the Faith Stealers, we have The Last, a story that is nothing short of tonal whiplash. Our intrepid heroes find themselves in a desolate waste, a war-torn world, a city decimated by nuclear hellfire. The very ground you stand on is superheated to glass. The only thing left standing, a solitary rocket. Usually the Doctor comes swanning in to save the day. Here it's too late. Doomsday's already been and gone, and there is nothing they can do to save those who remain. Not that they want to be saved. The only ones remaining are the government officials of the planet who ride out the storm in a presidential bunker. Convinced in their victory, President Excelsior is planning a lavish parade and celebration, which will be attended by nobody because nobody is left, and she's far too delusional to have noticed. While everyone else is putting their hopes in the ultimately doomed venture of leaving their destroyed world and finding another one. This is a sad, bleak, depressing story that plays in the fears of the Cold War. A lot of people don't really realize how close we came to being destroyed, to this being our reality, and how many times it nearly happened. It's in this bleak setting that we get some insight into Careers' past and his religion, and specifically their beliefs on death. And this is about the time that warning bells should be sounding. The Last is not my favourite of the Divergent Arc, but it's by no means the worst story. It's bleak introspection on the follies of nuclear war and the ever-looming threat of mutually assured destruction, which we have allowed to become the background noise of everyday life. The Seventh Doctor sums it up best.
All over the world, fools are poised, ready to let death fly. Machines of death, Morgaine, are screaming from above. A blight brighter than the sun. Not a war between armies, nor a war between nations, but just death, death gone mad. The child looks up into the sky, his eyes turn to cinders. No more tears, only ashes. Is this honor? Is this war? Are these the weapons we would use? Tell me!
If you're in the mood to stare into the abyss and have a good cry, give this one a listen. Following on from the audio equivalent of depressive nihilism, we have a palate cleanser in the form of Caerdroia. This one is really fun, and it's the best one so far of sticking to the mission statement of let's do weird shit and have fun with it. It's the kind of story that grabs you by the neckbeard, shakes you a bit, and then screams, "You want weird? I'll give you so much weird that you don't know what to do with it, mate." The Doctor finally gets one up on the Croaker. He traps him inside his brain, right? And he blackmails him into giving up the Divergent's base of operations, which is the planet Caerdroia. And upon exiting the intermediate zone, they find themselves in a beautiful green field with lots of cows. It looks like Wales, and there's a little town run by a parody of bureaucracy, with a giant cuckoo clock with no hands in the town square. And there's a labyrinth, or is it a maze? And inside the labyrinth, mate, there's a Manator, and there's 3 doctors now. He just split into 3 people, each one representing a different aspect of the Doctor's personality. There's the grumpy one, he's the Doctor's darkness. The one that's willing to do what's necessary regardless of how nasty, a part of himself that he's clearly beaten into submission by the time of the Time War. There's also his intellect, the obnoxious know-it-all, and then there's the Doctor's whimsy. I'm sensing another over-dependence on literary allusions. In this case, it's Winnie the Pooh, with Charlie nicknaming each of the Doctors after characters from the 100-Acre Woods, which means that this story and this video are now banned in China. This is all pretty clever, really. There's this long-standing fan theory that each of the 8 animals represents one of the 8 psychological functions of the cognitive brain. This story is just plain fun. The way the different aspects of the Doctor bounce off each other is great. We get to see the darkness 8 is capable of, and we finally get to see Charlie stick up for herself. Oh, and they find the TARDIS, and once again I remind you, it is not a spoiler if they put it on the damn cover. Rounding things off, we have The Next Life. And honestly, you can tell that this thing was meant to be a lot longer. By just how much stuff they had to cram into this one to wrap everything up. There's a lot of exposition dumping, but somehow they managed to do it in a way that doesn't sacrifice the story, while even somehow making room for introspection. So they have the TARDIS back, they can't travel anywhere in time, but they can go wherever they want in space. The TARDIS is caught in the gravity well of a mysterious blue planet, and they're about to crash. When they come to, the Doctor is on a beach getting attacked by some giant crabs, where he meets a random American lady played by Daphne Ashbrook. The same Daphne Ashbrook who played Grace in the TV movie. Meanwhile, Charlie and Chariz are trapped in a mental dream world where they are confronted with manifestations of their past, basically asking them what if the events that led to them meeting the Doctor never happened, and their adventures never happened, all while being subtly manipulated by the Croaker and Rassilon into turning against the Doctor. These parts I really like. It examines how Charlie's experiences in her travels and being around so much death has affected her mentally. It's an aspect of the companion experience that we don't really think about that much. They fly around the universe having mad adventures, meeting people, hearing all their hopes and dreams, and then they see them die pointlessly. The average companion is surrounded by death every episode. So much pointless death over and over again. And in New Who, Bill Potts is the only one who gives anything close to a realistic reaction. While the Doctor is so desensitized, all he can think about is retrieving his screwdriver. In Cariz's mental dreamland, we learn about his past. It's been hinted throughout that he is somewhat dangerous. And here we learn why, and if you don't want to be spoiled, here's a time code to skip to. Caeriz used to be a priest of the Church of the Foundation, a religion that believes all things must die, and part of their rituals involves a lot of killing, which he did willingly and joyfully. He has since left that life and he's been deprogrammed by his wife Lyda, who he since had to mercy kill in the Creed of Kromon after she begged for death, and now all of those urges are coming back. All the voices, the many victims, whispering in his ear constantly, and they will not stop. This whole time, he's been struggling to control his urge to kill, and the Doctor and Charlie are in danger for as long as they are with him. Isn't that lovely? Next thing, they escape the dream world and it becomes a completely different story, where the Doctor and not Grace are running for their lives from a big game hunter and the local natives who are convinced that the Doctor killed someone. All the while learning about the lore of the Divergent Universe, which I don't want to spoil but definitely needed a few more stories to flesh out. And this island is also the access point to the Prime Universe, where the Doctor can escape the Divergent Universe and go home if he wants. As it turns out, he's been free of the Zagreus energy for this whole time. And they learn a bunch more stuff that really needed another series to flesh out. So that's the Divergent Arc. Overall, I like it, but it is a big hot mess of a thing that really seemed to lose confidence in its premise as it went on and just sort of fizzled out. And I guess we could blame New Who for that. Really, it's a shame the show came back when it did. It'd be interesting to see how far they were going to take this, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. New Who was coming back, and with it a new generation of fans and old fans getting back into it. And to get those new listeners, they would need to do something a little bit more down to earth and closer to what the show was offering. But that's a story for another day. The Divergent Arc has the bare bones of something that could have been great. They did some really weird and interesting stuff, and it was genuinely groundbreaking. Scherzo was brilliant. Natural History of Fear, also brilliant. The Faith Stealers and Caerdroia, chef's kiss. But all of that was intercut with stories that feel much more at home in the Prime Universe and didn't do much exploration of where they could take this franchise. And it also really needed a lot more time to flesh out some of its ideas. It was a missed opportunity in my opinion, but I still enjoyed the hell out of it. But what do you think? Did you listen to the Divergent Arc? What did you think of it? Leave something in the comments and let's talk about it. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Watch my brother's channel to see me as a kid acting like a doofus. We did some really fun stuff back in the day. It was great. Do all of that and I'll see you in the next one.